1 year after the first Vrosian attack on New Terra, the galaxy had changed forever. On the neutral planet of Centauri Prime, representatives from 30 major species gathered for the Galactic Reconstruction Conference. The Grand Hall was decorated with symbols of peace, but the atmosphere remained tense and cautious. Earth, once just one voice among many in galactic affairs, now stood as the dominant military power. The Vrosian Empire had been dismantled, its territories divided between Earth and its allies. Species that had once dismissed humans now sought their protection or approval. Ambassador Edward Peters walked to the central podium. As Earth's new chief diplomat, he carried himself with quiet confidence. The room fell silent as he began to speak. 1 year ago, humanity was forced to remember our capacity for war, Edward said. It was not a path we chose willingly, but it was a path we were prepared to walk. Delegates from across the galaxy listened carefully, some with respect, others with barely hidden fear. The peace we build today must be different from what came before, Edward continued. The old system failed because it relied on words without strength to back them. From now on, Earth's policy is clear: peace through strength, not through concession. In the audience, representatives from the smaller species looked relieved. With the aggressive Vrosian Empire gone, many worlds were safer than they had been in generations. Other delegates, particularly those from formerly powerful military empires, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. After the main conference, Admiral Frank Nelson met privately with representatives from the Xilari Collective and the Tholian Assembly. These species had aligned with humans during the war and now found themselves elevated in galactic politics. "We appreciate your continued military alliance," said the Xilari Prime speaker. "Our worlds have never been more secure." Frank nodded. "We protect our friends. We deter our enemies. That's Earth's commitment moving forward." Across the room, Catherine Davis watched the interaction with mixed feelings. She had spent her life promoting peaceful coexistence, only to see humanity emerge as the galaxy's new military superpower. "Troubled thoughts, Catherine?" asked the Elteri ambassador Zinda, approaching her quietly. "I advocated for peace for 30 years, she replied. "Now I wonder if I was naive." "Perhaps not naive," Zinda said gently, "just ahead of your time. The galaxy wasn't ready for the peace you envisioned." In the council chambers on the rebuilt galactic station, the elder Zith'Ari representative, Solath, addressed a special session. His ancient eyes had witnessed centuries of galactic politics, but nothing like the rapid shift of the past year. "We mistook patience for weakness," Solath said, his voice carrying through the silent chamber. "We ignored the lessons of human history, that their capacity for war has always exceeded their desire for it. Let this serve as a reminder to all galactic civilizations. Humans prefer peace, but they excel at war." The words hung heavy in the air. None could deny their truth. On the rebuilt colony of New Terra, the place where the war began, families returned to homes that had been restored. Children played in parks that had once been battlegrounds. Though defensive satellites now orbited overhead, daily life had largely returned to normal. Susan Grant, who had survived the initial attack, stood at a memorial wall listing the names of those who hadn't. She placed her hand on the cold stone, remembering friends and colleagues lost in those first terrible hours. "Was it worth it?" asked Bill Rogers, her security chief, now walking with a prosthetic leg from injuries sustained in the fighting. "I don't know," Susan replied honestly. "But I know we'll never be caught unprepared again." In Earth orbit, the flagship Horizon prepared for departure. The ship had been rebuilt and expanded, now serving as both a diplomatic vessel and a powerful warship. On the bridge, Admiral Daniel Harris, promoted from captain after his early warnings about the Vrosians, looked out at the stars. His young assistant, Lieutenant Samantha Baker, joined him at the viewport. "Beautiful view, sir." Daniel nodded. "It is. Do you think we can return to being peacekeepers someday?" she asked. "Like we were before?" Daniel considered the question carefully. His answer would capture not just his own thoughts, but humanity's new place in the galaxy. Humans never abandoned peace, Lieutenant, he said finally. We just realized it must be protected rather than merely practiced. The ship's engines glowed to life, and the horizon set course for the stars, carrying humanity's new understanding of both peace and war to the waiting galaxy. Captain Daniel Harris stood at the viewport of the Earth vessel Horizon, watching as the massive Galactic Council station grew larger against the backdrop of stars. His blue uniform was crisp, his posture perfect. He had to represent humanity well today. "Captain, we're cleared to dock," said Lisa Martinez, looking up from her console. As Earth's diplomatic attaché, she had spent months preparing for this peace summit. "Thank you, Lisa. Let's hope they listen this time." The Horizon eased into its assigned berth with barely a tremor. Daniel checked his notes one final time. The evidence was clear. The Vrosian Empire was building military bases near human colonies, breaking 3 different peace treaties. For 6 months, Earth had tried to address this through proper channels. Inside the council chambers, representatives from 200 species filled the massive amphitheater. Some floated in special tanks, others required breathing apparatus, and many looked almost human. At the center sat the Zithari delegate Solath, whose species had guided the council for millennia. "We welcome all delegates to the annual Peace Summit," Solath's translator boomed. "May our discussions strengthen the bonds between our civilizations." Daniel waited patiently through 12 different opening statements. When his turn came, he approached the central podium. "Honorable Council members, Earth brings grave concerns today. We have documented 47 violations of the Border Worlds Treaty by Vrosian forces." Daniel displayed the evidence on the main screen. Satellite images, ship movements, weapons signatures. The Vrosian representative, War Marshal Grekthar, rose immediately. His scaled skin flushed a deep purple. "These are scientific outposts, nothing more. Humans see threats where none exist because conflict is in their nature." From his seat, the Elteri ambassador tilted his large head, his telepathic senses picking up the genuine worry from the humans. Yet the council seemed unconvinced. "The council has investigated similar claims 3 times this year," said Solath. "We found no evidence of treaty violations." "Because the inspection teams announced their visits weeks in advance," Daniel replied, struggling to keep frustration from his voice. "We request surprise inspections." Denied. Such actions would violate sovereignty principles. Daniel's communicator buzzed. A message from Susan Grant, who ran the colony on Proxima Delta. "Vrosian ships scanning our defenses again. 3rd time this week. Military configurations. What should we do?" Back on Earth, Admiral Frank Nelson sat in the underground command center with Defense Secretary Nancy Williams. The large screen showed the council meeting live. "They're not going to help us," Nancy said, watching Daniel's increasingly desperate attempts to convince the council. Frank nodded grimly. "Then we help ourselves." He pressed a button on his console. "This is Admiral Nelson. Implement Defensive Protocol 7. Across Earth's colonies, military vessels that had been standing down began powering up. Research labs unsealed prototypes that had been developed but never deployed. Training centers shifted from peacekeeping drills to combat exercises. On the horizon, Daniel received the coded message from Earth Command. His face remained neutral, but his heart sank. After 126 years of peace, humanity was preparing for war. "Captain," Lisa whispered as they left the council chambers. "They've activated Protocol 7. Daniel nodded slightly. The council has made its choice. From across the chamber, the Elteri ambassador watched them leave. Unlike the others, his species could sense the shift in the humans. The calm acceptance, the resolved purpose. It frightened him in ways he couldn't explain. That evening, while the council continued its scheduled discussions about trade routes and cultural exchanges, 5 human ships quietly departed from their usual patrol routes. They moved to positions near the Vrosian border, sensors at maximum range. In his private quarters, Captain Daniel Harris recorded his daily log. Day 241 of Earth Year 2387. The Council has dismissed our evidence again. Earth Command has initiated defensive preparations. I fear we are witnessing the end of humanity's great peace. We tried to warn them. History will note that we tried. He looked out at the stars, thinking of home, of the colonies, of all that might soon be at risk. We've been peaceful so long that they've forgotten who we were before. They may soon remember. Kevin Wright straightened his tie and took a deep breath. As Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, this might be his most important speech ever. The Grand Council chamber was packed with representatives from across the galaxy. Some watched with genuine concern, others with barely hidden smirks. Fellow members of the galactic community, Kevin began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. For 3 decades, humans have upheld every treaty we've signed. We've sent peacekeepers to troubled regions. We've provided aid during disasters. We've been good neighbors. He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the chamber. Yet today, I must show you this. He pressed a button on his datapad. The main display showed a planet with a small colony. Suddenly, flashes of light appeared in orbit. The recording zoomed in to show Vrosian warships firing on an unarmed supply vessel. This attack on our Palmer colony happened yesterday. 17 dead, all civilians. War Marshal Grekthar of the Vrosian Empire rose, his scales turning a deep red. This is fake. Humans are masters of deception. The Zithari moderator, Solath, raised a long, thin hand. Ambassador Wright, the Council requires verification from neutral observers. By the time your observers arrive, the evidence will be gone, Kevin replied, just like the last 4 times. Back on Earth, Defense Secretary Nancy Williams walked quickly through the underground halls of the Pentagon, joined by Director Paul Johnson of the Galactic Intelligence Agency. The Vrosians hit 3 more ships near Proxima Delta, Paul said, handing her a tablet. They're making it look like asteroid strikes, but our analysis shows weapon signatures. Nancy's face darkened. How many dead? 42 families. Nancy stopped walking. We've lost over 100 civilians in the last month, and the Council does nothing. They don't believe us, or they don't want to. Then it's time we stop asking for permission to defend ourselves, Nancy said. In the Council chambers, the debate continued. The Elteri ambassador, Zinda, whose large eyes missed nothing, noticed human attaches quietly leaving the chamber. Diplomatic staff were being recalled. Subtle, but telling. Kevin Wright made one final plea. The Vrosian Empire is systematically testing our defenses and attacking isolated targets. If the Council won't act, Earth must. Threats are not welcome in these chambers, Ambassador, Solath said coldly. It's not a threat. It's a reality. As Kevin left the podium, an aide handed him a message. His expression remained neutral, but the Elteri could sense his shift in emotion, from frustration to grim resolve. On the human colony of New Terra, Susan Grant watched the night sky with worry. More strange ships had been detected at the edge of their system. Any word from Earth? Asked Bill Rogers, her chief of security. Yes, they're sending ships, Susan replied. But they'll take 3 days to reach us. The Council, still investigating. She made air quotes with her fingers. Bill checked his weapon. I've got the militia on standby. Just in case. Susan nodded. For generations, human colonies had maintained small defense forces, mostly for show. Now those token militias were preparing for actual combat. On Earth, Admiral Frank Nelson stood before the Joint Military Command. 50 top officers from Earth and the colonies filled the room. As of 600 hours, the President has activated the Emergency Defense Act, Frank announced. All restrictions on military development and deployment are temporarily suspended. The room was silent. This hadn't happened in over a century. Colonel Miller, begin implementing Operation Safeguard. Captain Lewis, your fleet will reinforce the Proxima sector. General Ward, your ground forces are authorized for full defensive deployment. One officer raised her hand. "Sir, what about the Council's peacekeeping regulations?" "We've tried peace," Frank said simply. "Now we try survival." Across human space, mothballed warships were reactivated. Research projects that had been theoretical became urgent. Factories retooled for production of weapons and armor. In his private chamber, the Alteri ambassador Zinda composed a message to his government. He had lived among humans for 20 years and understood them better than most. "The Council believes humans are bluffing," he wrote. "They are wrong. I sense the change. Humans are not preparing for a skirmish. They are preparing for war. And they are very, very good at it." The alarms on New Terra colony screamed across every building and home. In orbit, the defense station erupted in flames as Rosian warships poured fire into its weakening shields. On the planet's surface, people ran to emergency shelters. Susan Grant, the colony administrator, activated the emergency broadcast. "This is not a drill. We are under attack. All civilians proceed to underground shelters immediately." The main colony tower shook as a stray blast hit nearby. Debris rained down on the streets. "Status of the defense station?" Susan asked the communications officer. "Gone. 342 personnel lost." Susan closed her eyes briefly. "And the distress call?" "Sent. Earth Defense Fleet acknowledges. Help is coming." In the nearby space sector, Lieutenant Eric White of the Rapid Response Frigate Defiant received the distress call. Its ship was the closest human vessel to New Terra. "How long to reach the colony?" Eric asked his navigator. 20 minutes at maximum speed." "Sir." Eric's communications officer looked up from her station. "Sir, we just received orders from the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. They say to hold position and wait for a diplomatic solution." Eric stared at the message, then at the live feed showing Rosian ships bombarding the colony. Fires were visible from orbit now. "Navigator, set course for New Terra, maximum speed," Eric ordered. "Weapons officer, prepare all systems." "Sir, the Galactic Peacekeeping Force is not watching their people die," Eric finished. "I am. We go now." The Defiant shot forward, its engines glowing brightly against the darkness of space. On the Galactic Council station, alarms sounded as emergency reports flooded in. Representatives hurried to the main chamber, many still in sleeping attire or formal wear from evening events. "The human colony of New Terra is under attack by Rosian forces," announced Tolath, the Zith-Eri moderator. "A clear act of aggression." The Rosian representative, Grekthar, stood immediately. "This is a misunderstanding. Our ships were conducting routine." He was interrupted by a human aide who rushed in and whispered to Ambassador Kevin Wright. Kevin's face turned pale. "The defense station is destroyed," Kevin announced, his voice tight with anger. "Over 300 dead. And now human vessels are moving to engage." The council chamber erupted in shouts and arguments. Above the noise, the communication system broadcast a new alert. "Attention council members. Human vessel Defiant has engaged Rosian warships at New Terra. Human fleet elements are mobilizing across 17 sectors. On New Terra, the Defiant burst into the system, immediately firing on the 3 Rosian cruisers. Though smaller, the human ship moved with surprising speed and precision. "Target their weapon systems," Eric ordered. "Disable them if possible." The first Rosian cruiser turned to face this unexpected threat. It fired a barrage that the Defiant narrowly avoided. Eric's ship returned fire, its advanced targeting systems finding vulnerabilities in the larger vessel. On Harrison's world, another human colony, Mary Clark watched the news with her husband Steve. "They're actually attacking us," Steve said in disbelief. Mary looked out the window where military transports were landing in the town square. "What do we do now?" "What they told us at the community meeting. Pack essentials. Be ready to evacuate if ordered." Steve reached for his old military service pistol in the cabinet. "And be ready to defend ourselves." Across the colony, families prepared with a grim efficiency that surprised the galactic observers. There was fear, Yes, but also a cold determination that seemed to spread from person to person. In the council chambers, Ambassador Kevin Wright received new orders from Earth. His face was expressionless as he approached the central podium. In light of the unprovoked attack on New Terra, Earth hereby withdraws from the Non-Aggression Treaty of 2340, the Weapons Limitation Agreement, and the Boundary Forces Treaty, effective immediately. The chamber fell silent. 3 major peace treaties, cornerstones of galactic stability, abandoned in a single moment. The Elteri ambassador watched with growing concern. In his centuries of life, he had studied Earth's history, including the ancient wars humans had fought among themselves. The efficiency, the scale, the determination, it was all there in human military records. And now, that long-dormant capacity was awakening. They do not understand what they have done, the Elteri whispered to himself as he watched the Vrosian delegation arguing loudly. They have not read human history as I have. They do not know what happens when humans go to war. Chief Engineer Olivia Brown walked quickly through the underground facility known simply as the Vault. For decades, this secret complex beneath the Rocky Mountains had developed weapons that were never built. Until now. The council representatives are here, her assistant said, hurrying to keep up. Olivia nodded. Show them in. 3 aliens entered the vast chamber, the Elteri ambassador Zinda, a Thelosian observer named Krell, and a Zeni military attaché. Their eyes widened as they saw what filled the enormous room. These are the XN-50 defense satellites, Olivia explained, pointing to dozens of spherical objects being loaded onto transport ships. They can track up to 500 targets simultaneously and neutralize incoming projectiles with 99.8% accuracy. This technology exceeds anything in your public research records, said the Zeni attaché, her voice translator unable to hide her shock. We developed them 15 years ago, Olivia said simply. We just never built them. Until today. The group moved to another section where large rail-mounted weapons were being assembled. Graviton cannons, Olivia continued. They disrupt the space around a target. No shields in known space can block them. The Thelosian observer, Krell, stepped forward. These violate at least 3 weapons treaties. Treaties that no longer apply to us, Olivia reminded him. As of yesterday. At Luna Base, Admiral Frank Nelson sat at the head of a large table. The room was filled with Earth's top military leaders. Colonel John Miller stood at a holographic display showing star systems across human space. Operation Safeguard has 3 phases, John explained. First, secure all colonial borders. Second, establish forward bases in these 7 sectors. He highlighted points on the map. Third, push the Vrosians back beyond the Orion Arm. This plan seems extensive, remarked a Zeni observer who had been permitted to attend. Almost as if we prepared it years ago. Frank finished. We did. We have contingency plans for conflicts with every major galactic power. The room fell silent as the alien representatives exchanged worried glances. For a peaceful species, the Zeni said carefully, you are surprisingly prepared for war. Frank's expression remained neutral. We prefer peace. We prepare for everything else. In his laboratory at Cambridge University, Dr. Alan Rodriguez stared at the message on his screen. The government wanted his cynobiology research, specifically his studies on Vrosian physiology. His colleague, Dr. Mira Patel, looked over his shoulder. They want to know their weaknesses. Helen nodded slowly. My research was meant to cure diseases, not this. You don't have to do it, Mira said. Alan thought of the news reports from New Terra. The bodies being pulled from rubble. The children in hospital beds. Yes, I do, he said quietly, and began compiling his files. On the front lines, the battle for the New Terra system had expanded. Lieutenant Eric White's Defiant had been joined by 6 more human vessels. Together, they had destroyed 2 Vrosian cruisers and driven the others back. Sir, "We're receiving a transmission from Admiral Nelson," the communications officer reported. Eric accepted the call. The Admiral's face appeared on screen. "Lieutenant White, I'm promoting you to captain, effective immediately. Your actions at New Terra saved thousands of lives." "Thank you, sir," Eric replied. "What are my orders now?" "Hold the line, Captain. Reinforcements are coming." "And White, the rules have changed. The Vrosians chose this fight. Now they'll see how humans wage war." The transmission ended. Eric turned to his crew, who looked both proud and solemn. "Prepare for more Vrosian ships," he ordered. "They'll be back in greater numbers." Across human space, military vessels emerged from hidden bases. Civilian ships were being fitted with weapons. Mining operations converted to producing materials for war. On the Galactic Council station, representatives gathered around displays showing the rapid human mobilization. Species that had dismissed humans as weak now watched with growing alarm. "How are they organizing so quickly?" asked a Tholian representative. The Alteri ambassador, Zinda, watched the displays with sad eyes. "Because they never truly forgot how to fight. They chose peace day after day, year after year. We mistook that choice for weakness." "Will they listen to the council now?" the Tholian asked. "Would you?" asked Zinda, after being ignored for so long. The Alteri's gaze drifted to where Kevin Wright, Earth's ambassador, stood alone, watching the same displays. The human's thoughts were hidden, but his posture spoke of resolve, not regret. "We are witnessing the awakening of a giant," Zinda said softly, "and I fear the galaxy will never be the same." The Galactic Council chamber had never been so crowded. Representatives from over 300 species filled every seat, with more standing along the walls. The emergency session had been called as reports of human military actions flooded in from across the galaxy. At the center podium, Representative Sharon Lewis stood alone. Once part of a 12-person diplomatic team, she was now Earth's only remaining diplomat on the council. Her colleagues had been recalled for consultations that everyone knew meant war planning. "The council recognizes Earth Representative Sharon Lewis," announced Tolath, the ancient Zith'ari moderator. Sharon looked around the chamber, noting the nervous expressions on many faces. She took a deep breath. "For 30 years, humanity served as peacekeepers. We mediated your conflicts. We provided aid during your disasters. We protected your trade routes." Her voice was calm but carried throughout the chamber. "When the Vrosians began violating treaties, we brought evidence to this council. You dismissed us. When they attacked our outposts, we asked for investigations. You delayed. When they destroyed our defense station and killed hundreds of civilians, we begged for action." She paused, letting the silence grow heavy. "We tried peace. We championed it. We bled for it." Her eyes swept across the chamber. "Now we'll see what happens when humans abandon it." The room erupted in shouts and arguments. Above the noise, reports continued to stream in on the main displays. Human fleets securing their borders, military bases appearing on previously uninhabited moons, defense systems activating around every human world. In a corner of the chamber, 3 representatives from the Auxiliary Collective huddled together. Historical enemies of the Vrosians, they saw opportunity in the chaos. "The humans are fighting our enemy," said the lead Auxiliary. "Perhaps we should offer assistance." "They were pacifists days ago," cautioned another. "They cannot be effective warriors." The third Auxiliary pointed to the latest reports. Human forces had just destroyed a Vrosian supply depot, cutting off resources to 3 battle groups. "I think," the third Auxiliary said, "we should reconsider our assessment of human military capability." On the mining colony of Cirrus Beta, Supervisor George Martin watched as workers converted massive excavation machines into mobile artillery platforms. What should have taken months was happening in days. "We need to reinforce these weapon mounts," George told his team. "They weren't designed for this kind of stress." "Already on it," replied his lead engineer, a woman named Diane. "We've adapted the support struts from the deep core drills." A Zeni observer watched with growing amazement. The aliens had thought humans were simple, straightforward creatures. Now he saw them transforming mining equipment into weapons with frightening speed and creativity. "How did you know how to do this?" the Zeni asked George. George shrugged. "Most of us had basic military training in school. Standard education. Just never thought we'd use it." The Zeni made notes to send to his government. Human standard education included more military knowledge than many species' dedicated warrior training. In Earth orbit, Admiral Frank Nelson received reports from across human territory. The Vrosians had attacked 3 more outposts but were being pushed back everywhere, yet it wasn't enough. "They still think this is a border dispute," Frank told his officers. "They don't understand we're fighting for survival." His communications officer looked up from her station. "Sir, the Xilari Collective is requesting to open diplomatic channels. They're offering an alliance against the Vrosians." Frank nodded. "Put them through." He turned to his chief strategist. "Prepare Operation Longbow. If the Xilari join us, we can catch the Vrosian fleet between our forces." On the council station, alarm spread as 2 minor species attempted to seize undefended human trade outposts, thinking to profit from the chaos. Within hours, both attacks were repelled with shocking efficiency. "How are they fighting on so many fronts?" demanded the Tholian representative. The Elteri ambassador, Zinda, who had studied human history, replied quietly. "Their military doctrine was always designed this way. They lived on a world with many nations, constantly at war. Fighting multiple enemies simultaneously is written into their strategic thinking." Solath, who had led the council for centuries, watched the displays with growing concern. The humans were not fighting like a species that had been at peace for generations. They fought like they had been preparing for this moment all along. "We have made a terrible mistake," Solath said to no one in particular. "We thought we were dealing with diplomats. We were actually dealing with warriors who chose to be diplomats." Sharon Lewis, standing alone at Earth's empty section of seats, heard the comment. She did not smile, but her eyes held a cold certainty that made the ancient Sitheri look away. 6 months into the conflict, the Vrosian Empire was losing badly. Their military leaders had expected an easy victory against the humans, who had been peaceful for so long. Instead, they faced an enemy who fought unlike any species they had encountered before. War Marshal Grekthar stood before the Imperial Council, his scales dulled with stress. Once proud and confident, he now looked aged and defeated. "The humans do not fight with honor," he said, displaying a star map showing Vrosian losses. "They avoid our main battle fleets and instead target our supply lines, communication hubs, and leadership." The supreme leader of the Vrosian Empire leaned forward. "Why can we not adapt?" "Because they change tactics constantly," Grekthar replied. "When we protect our supply lines, they strike our shipyards. When we guard our shipyards, they hit our fuel depots. They fight as if they studied our weaknesses for years." The truth, which Grekthar dared not say aloud, was that humans had indeed studied their enemies for decades. While pretending to be peaceful diplomats, humans had been analyzing every species for potential vulnerabilities. Deep in Vrosian territory, Major Linda Taylor led her Special Forces team through the underground tunnels beneath the command center. Her 6 soldiers moved silently, weapons ready. They wore armor that blocked heat signatures and scrambled electronic detection. "Security checkpoint ahead," whispered Sergeant Jeff Jones, looking at his scanner. 4 guards. Linda nodded and held up her hand with 4 fingers, assigning targets. The team moved forward in perfect sync. 4 quiet shots later, they continued deeper into the facility. "Command center is 2 levels down," said Jeff. 23 life signs detected, mostly military leadership. "Plant the devices as planned," Linda ordered. "Set timers for 30 minutes." The team split up, placing small devices at key structural points throughout the facility. These weren't simple bombs. They were designed to look like Vrosian technology and would leave evidence pointing to other factions within the Empire. As they exited through a maintenance tunnel, Linda checked the timer. In half an hour, the Vrosian Western Command would be destroyed, and their records would suggest internal sabotage. The confusion would paralyze their decision-making for weeks. On the Galactic Council station, military observers from a dozen species reviewed reports of human tactics with growing concern. They don't seek glorious battles, noted as any officer. They seek victory by any means necessary. A Thelosian military historian nodded. They fight like their ancient predators, patient, methodical, attacking weaknesses rather than strengths. The Alteri representative, Zinda, added quietly, and they hold nothing back. When most species wage war, they keep reserves, safe positions. Humans commit totally. On the front lines, Captain Eric White's battle group engaged a Vrosian fleet near the contested world of Proxima Delta. His ship, now the heavy cruiser Vindicator, led a formation of 12 vessels against 20 Vrosian warships. Target their command ships, Eric ordered. Disrupt their coordination. The human vessels moved in complex patterns, making them difficult to target while they focused fire on specific Vrosian ships. One by one, the enemy vessels lost engines, weapons, or communications. Rather than destroying them completely, the humans left them disabled and drifting. A Vrosian commander managed to send a transmission before his ship went dark. "Why do you not finish us? Where is your honor?" Eric's reply was simple. "This isn't about honor. It's about ending this war quickly." The human strategy was becoming clear to observers. Disabled ships required rescue operations, tying up more Vrosian resources. Dead crews created martyrs. Stranded crews created logistical problems and lowered morale. Back on Earth, General Richard Adams briefed a group of council representatives on human military philosophy. "You ask why we don't follow conventional rules of engagement," he said. "Because we don't see war as a contest or a game. We see it as a tragedy to be ended as quickly as possible." A Tholian representative stepped forward. "But the civilian casualties are far lower than if we prolong this conflict," Richard interrupted. "We're not fighting because we hate what's in front of us. We're fighting because we love what's behind us." The alien representatives exchanged troubled looks. This view of warfare, cold, pragmatic, focused on the quickest path to victory rather than honor or tradition, was unsettling to species with rigid military codes. As they left the briefing, the Alteri ambassador, Zinda, summarized what many were thinking. The humans do not enjoy war. They excel at it precisely because they hate it so much. They will do anything to end it quickly. The grand meeting hall of the Galactic Council was no longer a place of polite debate. Now it served as the center for emergency peace negotiations. Representatives from the oldest species sat at a large round table. They had seen countless wars across millions of years. None had expected this conflict to escalate so quickly. "We must end this before it spreads further," said the Thelosian elder, whose species had guided younger civilizations for eons. "The humans have pushed the Vrosians back in every sector. 3 more species have joined the human alliance. The balance of power is shifting too rapidly." Solath, the Zith'Ari moderator, nodded slowly. "We have prepared peace terms that both sides might accept." The doors opened, and a delegation of Vrosian officials entered. Once proud and confident, they now moved with careful restraint. Their empire was crumbling after just 8 months of war. "Where are the human representatives?" asked the lead Vrosian. "They will arrive shortly," Solath replied. They insisted on separate entrances. Among the council observers stood Catherine Davis, once the leader of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force and humanity's strongest advocate. For decades, she had assured the council that humans were committed to peace. Now she found herself caught between worlds, trusted by neither her own species nor the council she had served. The human delegation entered from the opposite door. Admiral Frank Nelson led the group, accompanied by military officers rather than diplomats. Their faces showed neither triumph nor anger, just cold determination. "Admiral Nelson," Solath began, "the Council has prepared terms for a ceasefire and..." We have our own terms, Frank interrupted, placing a data device on the table. Non-negotiable. The Vrosian leader hissed in anger. You would dictate terms to us. The Vrosian Empire has stood for, is losing on every front. Frank finished. These terms are harsh but fair. Your military will be reduced by 70%. Your border worlds will be demilitarized. Reparations will be paid to affected human colonies. Catherine stepped forward. Admiral, please. This approach will only lead to more conflict in the future. The Council can establish a neutral peacekeeping force too, like the one that ignored our warnings. Frank asked. No, Catherine. Those days are over. The negotiations continued for hours, with the Council trying desperately to soften the human demands. But the humans would not budge on key points. They wanted not just peace, but security. Deep space, near the Sol system, the Vrosian High Command had authorized one final desperate attack. If they couldn't win the war, they would strike at the human homeworld itself. Perhaps then the humans would agree to better terms. 7 Vrosian dreadnoughts, their most powerful warships, emerged from faster-than-light travel near Jupiter. They had expected to surprise Earth's defenses. Instead, they found 40 human warships waiting for them. How did they know? Asked the Vrosian fleet commander in shock. The answer came too late. Human intelligence had broken their codes months ago. The trap was set before the Vrosians had even left their territory. On the Council station, the peace negotiations were interrupted by urgent news of the battle. Everyone watched the main display as the human fleet engaged the Vrosian dreadnoughts. It will at least be a fair fight, said the Thelosian elder. Those dreadnoughts are the most powerful ships in the quadrant. The Elteri ambassador, Zinda, simply shook his head. Within 30 minutes, the battle was over. 6 Vrosian dreadnoughts destroyed, 1 captured intact. The human fleet had lost only 3 ships. Impossible, whispered the Vrosian delegate, his scales pale with shock. Our intelligence said Earth's defenses were nothing like this. Your intelligence was wrong, Frank said simply. We kept our true capabilities hidden. For centuries. The final negotiations were brief. The Vrosian Empire accepted all human terms, including complete demilitarization of their government. What had been one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy was now effectively ended as a military power. As the delegates signed the peace agreement, Catherine Davis approached Admiral Nelson. What happens now, Frank? She asked quietly. Humans were not meant to be conquerors. Frank looked at her, his expression softening slightly. We're not conquering, Catherine. We're securing. There's a difference. And when will it be enough? When will humans return to peace? Frank glanced at the council members, who watched the humans with new wariness and respect. Peace was never guaranteed by weakness, he said. From now on, our peace will be guaranteed by strength.